Dave Sussman, back with you from Freedom Fest, and I'm delighted to be sitting with author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Appreciate it, with all the ambient noise here. So we met last year. You had a film that came out, Hillary's America. It was very successful, fantastic. There was a premiere at Hollywood and at Cleveland, and a lot of our friends were there and joined us. We are now a year later. We have President Trump in the White House. All right. A lot of the warnings that you had in that movie and your other movies over the years as well. What impact do you believe this Trump administration will have on some of the concerns that you raised in those movies over the years, especially when it pertains to the left and leftism?
Well, the left was in a very dangerous position last year, because if they got another lease on government for 4 years or 8 years, I believe they would have completed the process of essentially delegitimizing the right, making the other point of view into something that is taboo, if not criminal. And they were using the weapons of government, by which I mean the agencies of government. And these days we live at a time where even the post office has a SWAT team.
Right.
So the government comes with a lot of firepower, and they were deploying that against their critics. A very dangerous form of lawlessness. That was and they believe that they controlled it. I think if Trump had lost, they would have the court, they would be on the way to getting the Congress, and they would have the presidency. So this was a very important election. I'm glad the movie played a small role in helping to defeat Hillary.
Yeah, it certainly did. Now, part of that movie and other books and articles that you've written about, and especially the speeches that you make across the country, you talk about the Democratic Party It's known as the party of diversity, but it is in fact quite the opposite. Why is that?
Well, the Democratic Party, you could almost say that racism was its platform for a century. And by that I mean the explicit racism of the Democratic Party would be on its campaign posters. In the 1860 campaign, for example, the Democrats would often feature Abraham Lincoln next to an ape. And the idea was that he was in bed with what they called the black Republicans. And so the Democratic Party embraced racism foursquare. I mean, they were the party of slavery before that, so they were coming from a bad place even before. And racism was the way in which the Democratic Party maintained its stronghold, particularly on the South, for almost half a century. Now, the question is, where's that racism today? I think the reason that it's less obvious to people is it's taken a new form. And now, essentially, the Democrats, instead of directly exploiting minorities, use minorities as a prop to create dependency, and they exploit everybody else. So they use minorities and their claim to be for the poor and the disadvantaged as a kind of intimidation mechanism to put everybody up against the wall and say, we have the moral high ground, you have to pay because we are the good guys helping these poor people. So this is something that progressivism invented, a new way of dealing with the race card, but it's no less degrading, and it leaves people you remember, slavery was a form of dependency.
Right.
And the new dependency of what I call the urban plantation, not all that different.
That new dependency, the urban plantation that you refer to, in some of your speeches that you've made, you refer to the New Deal and the Great Society. Was that the turning point? Where did the party switch?
The turning point was in the early 20th century when the progressives, who came even before FDR, they figured out that they needed a new strategy. Because while the old explicit racism kept the Democrats the majority party in the South, the Republican Party had dominated the country.
Right.
The Republican Party was the majority party from 1865, when the Civil War ended, all the way to 1932. So what we've seen in the last, almost a century now, is the success of the progressive project to redefine the agenda of the Democratic Party, going from direct exploitation, you may say going from the rural plantation to the urban plantation.
Okay. What impact has that have? I mean, we all see the statistics of the inner city and the money being thrown at poverty programs. I mean, it hasn't improved, has it?
The goal of the Democrats is not to improve anything. In fact, remember
Okay.
that if those places improved, if they were gentrified, if Starbucks moved in, high-tech companies moved in, lofts, people got jobs, all of them would then dust themselves off and say, well, we don't need the Democratic Party. So the goal of the Democrats is to keep those people in a kind of abject dependency, because the real objective is to get votes. These are reliable voters. If someone is dependent on you, they're going to vote your way. And the Democrats look at the inner city as a harvest of votes that they can cash in at election day on somebody else's wallet.
We're here at Freedom Fest. I just had Steve Forbes sitting in your chair. This is a phenomenal conference, but we are preaching to the converted. And you and I talked about this last year at Freedom Fest. We're preaching to the converted. The message that you're conveying right now, for a lot of people, they don't hear, right? Outside of our bubble.
Yeah.
How do you penetrate their bubble?
It's very tough because the media, even when I first came to America in the late 70s, typically the media looked at itself as a sort of a vehicle to exhibit what the debate was in the country. Even if you remember the early days of CNN, their show Crossfire,
yes,
they would have Buchanan on one side for the right and Michael Kinsley on the left.
Yep.
So this kind of ideological skirmishing was seen as normal, desirable, good for ratings. You'll never see the CNN will never have me on because the information I would put out would be so devastating to their underlying perspective today. The only conservatives they'll have on are people who are in-house, who sort of agree to play the CNN game. So as a result, a large number of people just don't get the information that they need. So it's a problem for our side. It's the reason I make movies, is to go beyond my normal book audience to a larger audience and reach people who I wouldn't reach any other way.
Yeah. Now, I know you got a book coming out shortly. We'll talk about that on another segment, but I want to discuss with you your thoughts on what you're referring to as fascism right now in the Democratic Party. We're seeing that on college campuses, Antifa. What are your thoughts since the election with this upsurge in fascism, if you will?
I mean, we're living in an upside-down world in which the party of fascism, which is the left, wears the garb of anti-fascism. Now, oddly, when you really look at them, they don't look like anti-fascists, they look like fascists because they wear masks and they carry weapons and they look like the old brown shirts or the black Mussolini's black shirts, but the difference is that the old fascists embrace the label. The new fascists pretend to be anti-fascists.
Right.
And so my book is a kind of unmasking. Now, I should say that, while we focus on the fascists in the street, the guys, for example, who, overturn cars and burn Starbucks and prevent speakers, that's not the most dangerous form of fascism. In fact, shortly when Hitler came to power, he basically killed Rome, who was the head of the brown shirts. Why? Because Hitler realized, I don't need street fanatics when I have the government.
Right.
So when I take over the government, I now have the army, the military. So ultimately, the most dangerous fascism is not the fascism of the street. It's the fascism that embeds itself in the institutions of the society, the media, academia, the movie-making industry, which of course the Nazis took over with propaganda. But Hollywood today is no less propagandistic than Goebbels ever was.
There's a viral video of you right now, and folks can find it on YouTube, where you are speaking, I believe it's at a university, and a leftist professor gets up and he says that everything you're talking about as far as fascism and the right and the left and the history is all wrong. It's all incorrect. And you really skewered him. It's a fantastic video, folks. You should Google this. You skewered him from the perspective of the history that you just referred to. But how do so you getting the message out to college campuses? We see it with the Shapiros. We see it with the McDonald's or the Charles Murrays. Okay, in Berkeley, for example. All right. How do you get the schools to open back up to conservative thought, to actual intelligent thought again?
Ultimately, long term, we have to figure out to create new types of education. There's no way to completely overturn the monopoly of the left in the schools. Now, obviously, me, Ben Shapiro, a bunch of us, we go speak on campus. But we're hit and run. We arrive on Monday, we leave on Tuesday. I try to put ideas in young people's heads that is going to confound them. That's going to make them go, if this is true, everything I've learned is wrong. So, and the way I do it is, Socrates did it with this sort of telling question. I try to do it with the incriminating fact. I'll throw a fact out there, which is easily verifiable or challengeable. So I'll say, for example, in 1860, the year of the Civil War, the year before the Civil War, no Republican owned a slave. All the slaves in the whole country, 4 million of them, were owned by Democrats. Now, this is a factual claim, right? It's a scientific claim in the sense that all you have to do is find 3 Republicans who owned a slave and I'll have to take it back. But no one can. So I unleash a major investigative effort on the part of the left to prove me wrong, and they'll come back. They'll say, well, Ulysses S. Grant inherited the slave on his wife's side, and I go, that's true, but at that time Grant was a Democrat. So even on your one refutation, I gotcha. So the power of facts is that I think it was Churchill who said, you can argue with them, you can deny them, you can look the other way, you can avert them, but there they are. And so I try to leave young people with those little, nuggets that are going to roost in their head and hopefully make them think.
Right. Well, greatly appreciate you taking the time. We're here at Freedom Fest. You're speaking. You're going to be speaking about all these issues here as well. There is a book coming out at the end of the month, The Big Lie.
It's called The Big Lie, and it's exposing the Nazi roots of the American left. So,
well, hard words, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And I greatly
you.
Appreciate you taking the time. People can find you on social media.
I'm all over social media. The Big Lie, it's bigliebook.com,
right,
or just DineshD'Souza.com.
Great. Greatly appreciate you taking the time, and you can continue to find us at Ricochet.com, or you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just check out Whiskey Politics. Thank you, and thanks to Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you.
Thank you.